Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraformer. Today I'm going to continue with the module development for Azure DevOps because I really want to get these modules done so I can crank out like some shared infrastructure and then a bunch of services that all consume that shared infrastructure. And in order to do that, you need to be able to have a very templatized Git repo that you can just slam out there into Azure DevOps with all the pipelines without having to go manually create everything. So this can be useful for if you're doing like microservices development using Azure Functions. You're going to have an app service plan that's going to be in your shared infra. Maybe you'll have a database or like a central database also in your shared infra. Maybe like Cosmos DB that replicates across regions. And then you're going to have each service that's going to deploy. And each service is going to have its own code, it's going to have its own function, and it's going to have its own release process so you can deploy updates and version updates to that particular service itself. So you don't want to have to maintain all these like disparate copies of pipelines and Terraform and have to go manually create all this stuff. So it'd be really nice if we had something that would set all this stuff up for us. So anyways, last episode, we refactored our Azure DevOps variable group into a module, actually two modules, kind of a base module, a baseline module, and then an Azure credential variable group module that makes it super easy to set up a variable group in a very consistent way, in a very opinionated way for Azure RM credentials. So this episode, I thought I would take the next step and say, well, what's the next logical block that we're going to deploy? And looking at that, I think it really is the repo and the pipelines associated with that repo. Assuming that in that repo, we only have one Terraform code base in there. But maybe it might make more sense. We'll look at this when we're done with it to determine if it makes sense to have pipelines separated off in case we have multiple working directories within the same repo that we want to have pipelines attached to, because that's a thing. People do that. Even working with other Terraform providers, sometimes it doesn't even make sense to split up. It's all the same. Source code. It's all the same service. It's all the same component of your architecture. So you kind of want to keep it all together. However, you need to run Terraform apply multiple times. I've done this with like the ADX provider. I've done this with the Grafana provider, where you deploy the infrastructure to Azure, but then you want to run something else on top of it. But you don't want to have the interdependencies of those providers built into that one Terraform apply. So you need to do Azure infrastructure in one Terraform apply, and then that next sedimentary layer layered on top of that using another Terraform apply. I think there is a place for having multiple Terraform applies, in which case you need to have multiple root module folders within a single repo. But for starters, I'm just gonna build a repo and a pipeline for a single working directory, and we're gonna just kind of see where we go from there. Before I get started, if this is content that you enjoy, please smash that like button. It really helps out the channel. Also, consider subscribing, and when you do, ring that bell so you know when my next video drops. I'm gonna be tackling this topic here over the next couple of weeks. So come back, check it out, see how things are going, check out the code on GitHub, and have a good time playing with the code yourself. Anyways, without further ado, let's get started. So last episode, I created this variable group structure within my module library. And this is my module library for Azure DevOps or AZDO modules. So I've kind of structured it with top level folders for key nouns within Azure DevOps. Variable group, I'm calling a key noun, i.e. an entity, a thing. And so I think what would make sense is for us to have a repository. So I'm gonna I'm going to add a new folder. I'm just going to call it a repo. And, you know, I'm not really sure if this is going to be, how reusable this is going to be. So I'm just gonna call this like my baseline, and this will be kind of like my generic one. So let me stub this out with the standard Terraform files, and we'll get started. Okay, with that done, I'm going to grab my repo resource from the hard-coded root module that we developed previously, and I'm gonna drop this in here. And there's a few things that I like about this, and just like with my variable group, I think there's some things that are going to remain hard-coded, but there's some things that I definitely don't want to have remain hard-coded. So first of all, this source URL, this seems like an arbitrary thing to keep as hard-coded. However, a git import as like the default initialization option seems insanely useful and reusable. So I'm going to leave that block hard-coded. I think this is a pretty normal thing, but I'm going to add a variable here. For that source URL. I'm extracting these hard-coded values. These hard-coded values aren't like worthless. Like, in fact, they're very useful, but for a different purpose, for examples. So I'm going to go create a sample for, let's just call it my multi-stage pipeline. And in this sample, I can kind of stub out my module declaration, and I can use some of those hard-coded values in there. This is kind of an efficient way, like as you're building out modules, you might want to have a root module that you can play with to experiment with the module that you're developing. And as you are refactoring hard-coded scratch code from whatever root module you're stealing this resource block from, it might be helpful to have those values that are on your clipboard as you're cutting it out of there, instead of just deleting it and then having to find it later to create the example. Just slam it in the example as you're doing it. So this is a technique that I do when I am kind of refactoring modules. So the name, of course, we're going to call this var name, and this is going to be the name of the repository. And then, of course, I'm going to pass in my var project ID here. And so now I know that I don't have a lot of variables, so this should be pretty easy to remember. I just need a project ID, and then I need a name. And in my sample, I think that I had a project. Yeah, so this is my infrastructure project. I might actually change this because for testing purposes, I don't think that's a great look to like do that. So maybe I'll just create a test project like when I spin this up, because I don't want to go create this repo with that. But for the time being, I'll just leave that the way it is, and we'll be fine. The project ID I can pass in, and I can always change this later. Okay, so far so good. I've got all of the things. So I've got my Git repository. I'm importing from that source URL. So now what? Well, in my old environment, so this repo, if we think about what this repo is being used for, this isn't just any repo. This repo contains a multi-stage pipeline. That multi-stage pipeline is making some assumptions about what variables that this pipeline has. The pipeline variables, both the Azure credentials as well as the application name and the environment name, and then also embedded within my multi-stage template, I've got some embedded within that Git template, I have YAML files, and those YAML files are very opinionated. So we may have to go look at this, and I'm kind of backing away from this idea of starting off with this as being a baseline repository. I think I may want to I think I may want to make this just like multi-stage and just go full bore, because I don't see a whole lot of value of having a baseline repo just yet. The only value that it would do, it just seems like it's canonizing this initialization type, which I don't think adds a tremendous lot of value. So I'm gonna nix on the baseline, and we're gonna go multi-stage Terraform pipeline. That's what we're gonna do. So that's what this repo is for. And now that we're doing a multi-stage Terraform repository, that means we're going to have pipelines and all the things that we need to provision for this thing. So I think what I should do is I should probably add pipelines, and we'll just drop our. I guess we had 2 pipelines, so I could leave it like that: pipeline plan, and then pipeline apply. Right? And so inside here, I can take my plan pipeline, and we'll check all these things to make sure these make sense. I'm not sure if the environment still makes sense, but we will double check all these. And I'm going to drop the apply in here. And yeah, again, see the YAML path? These are all built into that structure. So I'm even kind of rethinking. So let me go to my example. It's no longer baseline, it's multi-stage Terraform. And this source URL, because this template is so ingrained with the contents of this source URL, I don't even know if it makes sense for this source URL to be, to be an input variable. I mean, at the very least, I need to set a default, right? And if they don't like the default, maybe they could add a different URL, but they would have to think very hard about offering a different source URL, because there's going to be a lot of things in here, like the paths, would need to be the same. Certain assumptions, like the fact that we have a plan and an apply pipeline, and all these things are going to be really, really important that we know about these. So these pipelines were built with the assumption that we were going to create a pipeline per environment. So that means if we've got 2 environments, dev and prod, we're going to have 2 pipelines. So for dev, we're going to have a plan and apply, and for prod, we're going to have a plan and apply. So 2 plan pipelines, 1 for dev and 1 for prod, 2 apply pipelines, 1 for dev and 1 for prod, depending on how you look at it. Now, this module doesn't have the environments, but I think it does make sense for us to add that variable. So why don't we go snag the application name and the environments list, and we'll add this as part of the thing. So now, not only do I need to put it in a project, but I need to set the application name, which is going to be foo. And then I need to set the environments, which is going to be an array. And I'm just going to call it dev and prod for right now. Of course, we could do dev test prod. We could do dev QA prod, dev QA UAT prod. Whatever environments make sense for you, you can put that in there. Now, the repo name. If the repo name is, maybe the repo name should be a derivative of the application name. It's hard to say. I mean, you may have good reasons, like to have your repo a different name than your application name. So I'm just going to call it repo name, and we'll leave it like that. Because the application name is definitely something that is used and tied to the naming conventions of the things that are deployed to Azure. So you may not want to have the same naming conventions for your repository. So having those as independent seems like a good idea to me. What other environments do we have here? Or what other variables do we have here? So we have the repository reference is broken, which is it's no longer infra, it's main. So we need to use that. We have to have a variable group for the credentials, which we have a module to do that, but and working directory is different there. Yeah, or working directory is actually hard coded. So this is definitely, like a project that has a single Terraform environment that you're deploying to. We don't have multiple Terraform working directories in here. So I may want to embed that within the name of this folder, but I'll leave it like this for now, and we'll just kind of see how this goes. But I definitely need my variable group for the Azure credentials, and I'm kind of thinking that may change based on the number, or based on the environment that you're deploying to. So the plot thickens. So let's look at this, and let's go var groups.tf, and just like we coded this up previously, but I use the resource block, right? So now I'm going to be using my module, and this is my Azure credential module, and the count is going to be length of var.environments. And then what does an Azure credential need? It needs a name, it needs a description, and then it needs the Azure credentials, right? So a name, a project ID, and then the Azure credentials. Now, the Azure credentials, I think I need to grab that from a map of Azure credentials. And the way we did this in the hard-coded root module is I literally put that in there. We got a map with the and the key is going to be the environment name. So I can pretty much use the same structure to go grab these values. So, and I think the structure of this object is identical to the structure that I've specified. So I don't even have to go do a lot of the shenanigans that I used to do, where I have to set the client ID and everything. I'm hitting my variable, which is a map. I'm hitting my environments, which is a list of string. I'm grabbing the correct environment name from there, using that as a key to my Azure credentials, which thus pulls the correct Azure credentials object, which happens to have the exact same structure as the credential that I'm passing in there. So now what is a good name for this variable group? And I think we called this in our, in the other root module, we called this Azure credentials, and we just put in the environment name, which I think makes a lot of sense. So let's just smash these together, and now we got our Azure credentials. Now, one thing that we didn't do is we also had a backend configuration. So this was a variable group that we created previously for Azure RM backends. I'm just going to go ahead and create an Azure backend variable group, and we're going to go copy pasta all the things from the Azure credential, and we're just going to make some slight tweaks. Now the backend configuration only has three things: the resource group name, the storage account name, which I'm going to delete the secret, and then the storage account container name. Now there's different ways of configuring this, but this is a very common way that I use all the time. Okay.
The basement door is still unlocked.
But there's lots of ways that you can do this, but this is a way that is very common that I use quite a lot. So I've got those things set. I need to change the object structure to be a little bit different. So we're gonna have, instead of these things, we're gonna have, what do we call this? Resource group. We're gonna call this storage account. And we're gonna have the container. So this is, and then this is our Azure Backend. And so now inside here, we're gonna use Azure Backend. There we go. So now I have a pretty nice Azure Backend module. Same contract with a different structure. Again, reusing through inheritance our baseline module, which cleans things up nicely. And so now in my variable groups, I can go declare this variable group right here, and we're going to call this Azure Backends. And we're gonna just call this Azure Backends, and we're gonna call this Azure Backend, and we are going to set up a collection. Yeah, there we go, Azure Backends. It's already set up, and the structure is exactly, how I set it up. So there we go. I'm second guessing this. I'm gonna pull that out as an input variable. I don't want that as an input variable at all. It's gonna bug me. This module is so tied to the contents of this URL here that it should not be an input variable. That's just like asking the consumer of your module to shoot themselves in the foot. So I'm just gonna omit that, and if somebody really feels strongly about it, they can like look at the source code for this module and copy pasta. Okay, so I feel like Azure Backend, singular. Now this is no longer a variable group. It's a module, so we have to fix that reference. See, we're using the resource type to access that. Okay, there we go. And I feel like we're in pretty good shape. Azure Backends is plural. The plurality singularity thing is definitely gonna bite me someday. But other than that, I think we're doing pretty good. We still have a repo name. I think that makes sense to have the repo name be different than the application name. But yeah, I think this is pretty much it. So let's look at this. We do not have the things that we need. So first of all, we need to have an Azure credentials, which is a map. So right off the bat, we're gonna have dev, and then we're gonna have prod, and then we're gonna have another thing called Azure Backends, and it's also a map, and we're gonna have dev, and we're gonna have prod. Okay, and then we are going to kind of steal some of our sample code, because we already have an Azure credentials object here. So I'm just gonna snag this object declaration, and I'm going to jam that in right here for dev, and then I'm gonna jam that right there for prod, and then I'm going to jam here for the backends, but of course this is gonna have to change to resource group. This is gonna have to change to storage account, And then this is going to have to change to the container. And once I do that, then I can copy pasta this and we'll be happy. So there we go. So this declaration is a little bit messy. It's a little bit crazy, but and honestly, you probably wouldn't have many of these things like hard coded. I just have them hard coded because I don't actually have the credentials to go in here, and I'm kind of just going to test my module. But yeah, you would definitely not have these blocks hard coded. You would have to, import them as input variables, because you do not want to have any of that stuff hard coded in your code here. But so for right now, I feel like this is pretty good to like a good place to like test my module. So where am I? Let me go up. I need to go up, and we need to go into the multi-stage pipeline. And let's just do Terraform init. Yep, and right off the bat, I've got some baddies. So var groups, invalid source address, probably, I don't have a source address at all. What happened there? Whoops. So we're going to go back up to Azure credential. Actually, the IntelliSense has gotten way better. I don't remember it being this good. So yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy about this. And yeah, so I like to keep count and source on modules kind of together because they are meta arguments, and it's good to have meta arguments kind of distinguished from regular arguments for modules. So just calling that out. That's a Mark thing. That's not, I don't know if that's like normal for other people. And I probably need to bring my versions over. Otherwise, the provider gods are going to hate my guts. There we go. Now let's, I probably need to copy pasta my thing here, my debug.sh, which allows me to run locally. So we still have some errors. Var groups in module Azure Backends. Azure Backend is required, but no definition found. So I think it's probably just like, just bad naming of things. Let's see here, Azure Backends. I wonder if this could cause me a problem with the module being the same name as the variable. It's plausible. So what module is actually pissed off? So it's clear it's the multi-stage, and it looks like so Azure Credentials is what's expected there. So if I go look at this, so this is the problem. I didn't update this on my backend. So my backend, the variable is Azure Backend, but I left that as credential. So yeah, of course it's gonna throw some shade. Now, different error. Okay, repo name is required, but no definition was found. I did rename the repo name. I probably didn't update the argument. So we're squashing bugs fast here. Project ID. Okay, it's pissed off about project ID. It's probably because it's a data. No. Oh, it must be because I did not update references to use var project ID. Probably in the pipeline. Yep, that's it. That's it. I left in the resource type reference, which the resource does not exist. It is 100%, oh Lord, it is 100% dependent on the input variable. And we still have now like we're pushing through the fog of war here. So count.index is a number, Azure credentials is a list of objects. The object does not have an attribute named ID. That absolutely makes sense. I don't know where I would be referencing the ID. Pipeline apply. Variable. Oh yeah. So I made this module, but the module doesn't have any outputs. So that's a bad problem. So I need to this is where, like, when you use module inheritance, those outputs have to bubble up, right? So I have to go to my baseline module, create an output called ID, set the value to the value of the resource. So this guy .main .id, and now in all of my I guess child modules, I need to output that as an ID. So now this should be good. All of my child modules are doing so, which means they should be happy. We still have some errors, probably branch name, inappropriate value for branch name, string is required. So I think we're getting down to the really important stuff. Git repository, branch name. Oh, this is on the pipeline. So did I erase this value? Yeah, it should be default branch. I must have hijacked that when I copied. Yeah, I must have just like deleted it somehow. Interesting. So there we go. This is going to create this repo for us. Should be tons of fun. Do I need anything else? I don't know. I probably need an environment. So I should declare my environments that this repo is going to manage. Hence. And I suppose we could convert, now this project is going to have to be var project ID. I suppose I could get rid of the use of count in a lot of places. That might help clean this up, because if I want to go add another environment, I don't want to have to go rename everything. Environments is actually a pretty handy iterator. Now the repo doesn't iterate over the environments. This one does. So I might just go grab that for each meta argument and just slam it on all the things. Then we're going to get crazy errors for the count. I guess I could just each.value should be what I'm looking for here. credentials. And I mean, if this is a map, then I think I should, once I convert all these to for each, I think I should be good. Each.value. All right, so let's go grab for each environment. For each environment. And then we'll do each.value in all those places. And there we go. And of course, variable groups, it's going to be the same thing. So for each, I got to do that on my credential. I got to do that on this, and then I got to go each.value. And we're going to grab the backends using each.value. This does kind of clean it up a bit. So credentials, backends are all set up using for each. I think that gets rid of everything that has the count. Let's go see how badly we screwed things up. Yeah, okay. Is a list of 2 elements. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it would make sense to refactor my environments into just a map of nested objects. That might be interesting. So if I create a map of objects, then the object can have a key, and actually basically what I need to do is I need to declare an Azure credential object, which is going to be this, and then I declare an Azure backend, which is going to be this. And now I can just use this map of environments, and I can use that. And then this will kind of keep all of the environment stuff in the same place, right? And so I've got, I'm a huge proponent of keeping input variables simple, but it just seems like this is probably the cleanest way to declare, this just seems like the cleanest way to declare my environment configuration, right? My environment has a name, and it's going to have a key, and then I'm going to have a value for that. And so when I go through here, I'm going to need to use the key. And some places I'm going to need to use the key. Some places I'm going to need to use the value. So here, anytime I need to use the environment name, I have to use the key. But then anytime, and here I'm actually going to use the key. Yep. And then the key is going to be set there. Copy pasta causes so many problems. Now these variable groups, this is where it gets fun, right? So the name is going to have the key, but then the value, I need to access the Azure. So I need to access my Yeah, I'm actually not going to access the variable. I'm going to go each.value, and then I'm going to say .azure credentials. Yeah, so this is actually much cleaner if you think about it. And we just get rid of that. And now we can use the key. And this should be good. Of course, I'm going to have to do some pretty heavy surgery right here. Right? Yeah. So my environments, this, not too bad, not too bad. My environments turns into a map, right? And so now basically the complex object is going to get a little bit funny. So instead of being a complex object with this stuff on it, I'm going to have this stuff in here. La, 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 la. And then I'm going to have this stuff in here. And so I can actually just copy that structure because I'm going to take the Azure backends. I'm going to change that. And then I can just get rid of this garbage. Right. So really my environments is kind of dominating this scheme here. So it's kind of dominating this, my environments are kind of dominating the scheme here. So I'm gonna move all the other variables up to the top so that I can then have my environments in one contiguous block. So yeah, so basically I've got my dev environment, I've got my prod environment. Each environment has an Azure credential, each environment has a backend, and we should be happy with this right now. So let's try that. And there we go. So I think we're happy now. I think we're pretty happy. Let me see if I can provision this on an actual project that I don't mind losing. So I'm actually going to go create a new project that I have no problem deleting. So instead of this infra thing, I'm just going to go create test, and we're just going to call it, I guess, the application name. And that's what we're going to do here. So let's see what it says about this. Yeah, it's no longer a data reference. Got me. Okay, and it's no longer going to be called infra. So we are going to provision this project, and we're going to see what happens. So now I'm going to go modify this to take in input parameters so that I can just pass in whatever I want. And so now I'm going to go debug.sh, and I can say apply, and I can say auto approve. So I'm basically passing in two command line arguments, and all of them are going to get attached to that last Terraform command, which you can see we're running apply and we're doing auto approve. And we're going to go create a bunch of stuff, and let's see if we like this. Let's see if we like this. Of course, my pipelines won't work because all of my credentials and backend are just jacked. So yeah, but we'll see what this thing spits out. Ooh, we have an error. It's mad. It doesn't like the build definition with module line 1 of the Terraform plan. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Let's go out to this thing. We got test 1, 2, 3 here. Let's go look at the repo. We got test Terraform, which has all the things in it, right? This looks pretty good. That is another thing. My repo only has TFR files for dev and prod. So if you wanted to do multiple environments, we would have to do something a little bit different here, right? But my multi-stage, let's go look at our pipelines. So I've got dev and prod backend. Let's look at that. Backend looks fine. And then let's look at credentials. So that secret is a secret, but the value is foo. So all my variable groups got created. Let's look at my pipelines. Now, so one of my plans failed. So let's go try run Terraform. Let's just try this again. Maybe it just, was having a bad day, and it was just having a bad day. So I hit refresh, and there we go. We got all the things. So I got test, I got dev, and I got prod, I got plan, I got apply. Let's go look at this stuff. If we go look at my ... triggers. All right, I got my pipeline variables. We're going to source Terraform. We're going to application name, boom. Environment name, boom. Variables, credentials, dev, backend dev. I think we're good. I think we're good. Let's go look at apply, edit, ... triggers. This is dev apply. So again, dev, app name, working directory, variable groups, same for dev. We're just going to be applying. Let's go look at prod. Okay, prod should have some different things. So, yep, we got prod. We got our working directory is the same, really. And then we got different variable groups to create, to use different credentials and to use a different backend. So there we go. We have a module. Now the environments, the environments block is a bit nasty. I'm not super happy about this, but I don't know really how a better way of dealing with this. If you're going to be provisioning a multi-environment setup, you're going to need, and you want to have multiple credentials. I suppose if everything's going to the same subscription, let's just play pretensies, right? So if everything's going to the same subscription, I could just take these object declarations. This would simplify it. Sub 1, right? Sub 1 creds. And then I could go sub 1 backend, right? And then now all I have to do is go local dot sub 1 creds, and I go local, right? And if I'm God forbid using one Azure subscription for everything and one Terraform credential for everything, there's ways of making this less complex. But if you are creating credentials that are kind of more isolated from a blast radius standpoint, as you should, then you're going to have to configure those different pipelines to use those different credentials. There's really no way around that. Now, using local blocks to kind of simplify that, so that when you go look at this repo that you're creating, so that it's not ridiculously complex and you can kind of wrap your brain around it. I think this is a good use of locals to kind of simplify that complexity of just inline declaration. Maybe the use of these locals makes this look a little less intimidating. Just saying. So I don't know. What do you think? Do you like this approach? Do you have any other ideas? What's a better way of doing this? Because we got to get those credentials and those backend configurations in there somehow. So anyways, let me know in the comments below. If you are liking this content and you like what you're seeing, please smash that like button and consider subscribing to my channel. It really helps out a lot. I work very hard trying to earn your subscription on this channel, where we're learning Azure through Terraform and automation. So I hope you're having a good time. I'm having a great time. Keep those questions coming. Let me know what you guys are thinking about. Let me know what you guys are working on. And yeah, until next time, this is the Azure Terraformer signing off.